When you picture a revolutionary, you probably don't immediately imagine a curious 23-year-old medical student struggling with severe asthma, right? But back in 1952, a young man from Argentina named Ernesto Guevara embarked on this absolutely grueling 8,000-kilometer road trip across South America. We're talking about a massive, sprawling continent filled with jagged mountain peaks and incredibly dense jungles. And this trip, it would completely upend his entire worldview. So today in this explainer, we're going to visually track that exact journey. We're going to look at how what started as a quest for adventure filled with crazy breakdowns, stunning landscapes, and really profound human encounters actually sparked the transformation of a typical medical student into one of history's most highly polarizing figures. Okay, let's dive into this. Our itinerary today covers 1. The ambitious departure. 2. Breakdowns and busted bikes. 3. The Chuquicamata miners. 4. Echoes of the Incas. 5. Dignity at San Pablo. And finally 6. A continental awakening.
So let's get right into it with Section 1, The Ambitious Departure.
Picture this, it's January 1952. Ernesto Guevara and his close friend Alberto Granado set out from the Argentine city of Córdoba. Now, they had very little money to their names, but they had this really deep desire to just get out there and meet ordinary people rather than, rubbing elbows with wealthy elites. Their initial game plan relied on this incredibly heavy, vintage 1939 Norton 500 motorcycle. They actually affectionately named it La Poderosa II, which translates to the Mighty One. But honestly, with its super bulky frame and a sputtering engine, it was pretty ironically named. It was anything but mighty. During those first few weeks, the motorcycle was just constantly failing them. On top of that, Ernesto's severe asthma flared up almost nonstop because of the biting cold and the thick dust getting kicked up from the dirt roads. They spent their days literally pushing this incredibly heavy bike through thick mud and over jagged rocks. And because their pockets were essentially empty, they were sleeping in barns and abandoned buildings, just trading their basic medical knowledge for a meal from strangers.
You really have to appreciate the sheer ambition of this route. From January to August of 1952, they were aiming to travel over 8,000 kilometers. Think about that for a second. Their goal wasn't just to go on a fun joyride. They wanted to visit remote hospitals, spend time in leper colonies, and truly explore the raw, completely unfiltered reality of the South American landscape. They were aiming to cross towering mountain ranges and navigate vast jungle rivers before they eventually made their way back home.
Which brings us to Section 2, Breakdowns and Busted Bikes.
As they crossed the towering, freezing peaks of the Andes Mountains into Chile, the harsh realities of the trip really set in. La Poderosa II became increasingly unreliable until eventually it crashed and was completely damaged beyond all repair. The Mighty One was dead. Now here is the great irony of this whole trip. This journey is famously remembered and heavily documented as the Motorcycle Diaries. But after that crash in Chile, the vast majority of this epic odyssey was actually completed using far less glamorous methods. They just kept going. On foot, they hitched rides on passing vehicles, rode in the back of really bumpy supply trucks, took boats, and just hopped on train cars whenever they possibly could.
Moving on to Part 3, the Chuquicamata miners.
Up in northern Chile, Ernesto and Alberto arrived at Chuquicamata. Now, this was a giant, sprawling copper mine, just an imposing hub of immense industrial wealth carved right out of the earth. It's a massive visual. But directly juxtaposed against that massive operation were the terribly impoverished miners themselves. Ernesto witnessed men working under incredibly dangerous conditions, living in extreme squalor, and facing severe political repression. During this specific stop, they actually met an impoverished couple who had been exiled and driven from their home entirely because of their political beliefs. Ernesto was deeply, deeply moved by the intense suffering he saw happening right at the hands of this massive industrial machine.
And this brilliantly illustrates a profound turning point for the young medical student. Confronted with the staggering industrial output of the mine on one hand, and the desperate, heartbreaking living conditions of the workers pulling the copper from the earth on the other, Ernesto began asking himself a really profound internal question. Why does such immense wealth exist right alongside such crushing poverty? This single question basically initiated a major, permanent shift in his worldview.
Next up is Section 4, Echoes of the Incas. Leaving Chile behind, the travelers hitchhiked and trekked their way into Peru, moving deep into the Andes to encounter the stunning remnants of ancient civilizations. Just imagine the pure visual impact of arriving at Machu Picchu back then. Ernesto stood among these magnificent, towering, ancient stone ruins, built high up in the clouds. He was looking at undeniable structural proof of a highly advanced, sophisticated society that had thrived centuries before.
But looking around at the local population surrounding these majestic ruins prompted another major ideological reflection for him. Ernesto wondered, why are the direct descendants of such a brilliant advanced civilization now living in profound poverty and facing systemic discrimination? Based on what he observed throughout the Peruvian highlands, he really came to believe that centuries of colonialism and deep-seated societal inequality were entirely to blame for the current hardships of the indigenous populations.
This leads us right into Section 5, Dignity at San Pablo.
Deep in the Peruvian Amazon, the pair arrived at the San Pablo leper colony, which was situated right on the banks of the massive, winding Amazon River. Now, at this time in history, leprosy was incredibly stigmatized, and patients were almost always treated with deep fear and extreme isolation. But Ernesto took a radically different approach. He didn't just provide standard medical care, he provided deep human dignity. He actually refused to wear medical gloves when it wasn't strictly necessary, believing that these patients desperately needed basic human contact. He ate meals with them, he shook their hands, he even organized and played football matches on the grounds with them. The patients were amazed and deeply admired him because, perhaps for the first time in a very long time, someone was treating them purely as equals.
And there's this incredible anecdote from his time there. While at the colony, Ernesto turned 24 years old. To celebrate, the hospital staff threw him a little party. But the patients were actually housed on the completely opposite bank of the Amazon River. So, in the middle of the night, defying his severe, crippling asthma and the incredibly strong, frankly dangerous currents of the Amazon, the 24-year-old Ernesto literally dives into the water and swims all the way across the river just to spend the rest of his birthday evening with the patients. It's crazy, right? It became one of the most defining, legendary memories of the entire continental journey.
And finally, Section 6, A Continental Awakening.
After leaving Peru, they traveled through Colombia and up into Venezuela. And it was here that the two friends finally parted ways. Alberto accepted a job working in a Venezuelan leper colony, while Ernesto continued on, eventually making it back to Argentina by August of 1952 to finish up medical school. So the crucial point is what he brought back with him. This journey exposed Ernesto to a continent-wide reality: extreme poverty, systemic land inequality, the dangerous exploitation of workers, overt racism against indigenous peoples, a severe lack of healthcare, and political repression. He didn't just see these as random, isolated incidents in different countries anymore. He concluded that these were deeply interconnected, structural problems that were plaguing all of Latin America. And perhaps most importantly for his future, he decided that these were ailments that medicine alone could never cure.
Which leaves us with this final thought. The 1952 motorcycle journey didn't instantly transform Ernesto Guevara into Che, the revolutionary, the exact moment he walked through his front door. But, as we've seen through all the events documented in the motorcycle diaries, it absolutely planted the ideological seeds. It really forces us to ask, how does stepping out of your comfort zone to witness the harsh realities of others fundamentally alter your destiny? It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most profound educations don't happen in a sterile classroom. They happen out on the muddy, broken roads of the world around us.